Okay, so euthanasia or assisted suicide raises a number of issues. One of the issues is in terms of, say, uh, whether euthanasia or assisted suicide should be legalized or not. Now, those who oppose any sort of legalization of euthanasia generally do it on the basis of what they would claim the sanctity of human life. Okay? Now, what do you mean by the sanctity of human life? Now, very often, the basis on which this argument is made is essentially religious. A particular religion, like say Christianity or Hinduism or Islam, would have held life to be very sacred, and hence nobody has the right to end a life since it is considered to be sacred. Now, the point is, I don't think any modern society can base its legal structure on legal precepts. It has to have some secular basis. Now, is there a secular basis for claiming that life is sacred? Okay? There is a sanctity to life. In some sense, yes, but not necessarily in the sense that religion very often makes it out to be. I think in a secular sense, life is sacred, or this is sanctity to life in so far as once life starts, then the quality of life has to be good. So it's a question of say some sort of religious sanction in terms of sanctity versus the social concern for good life. Okay. Now, if one takes the second position in terms of, say, what is important is good life, quality of good life, a dignified life, by its very nature would mean that there has to be a right for also ending that particular life in a dignified fashion. I think that is the most important argument in favor of assisted suicide or euthanasia. Okay? And I would go with that argument rather than an argument which will bar euthanasia or assisted suicide on purely religious grounds or in terms of, say, so-called sanctity of life. But having said that, one also has to take into account a large number of other issues in terms of, say, essentially, while you legalize euthanasia or you legalize assisted suicide, you also have to put in a regulatory framework, basically to see to it that it is properly administered and it is not misused. Okay. There are any number of very tricky questions involved here in terms of what one can do in terms of what is generally called within quotes an incompetent individual, that is someone who cannot take a decision at the end of one's life as to whether the life should continue or not. In such a situation, who has the right to take the decision? Is it the physician or is it the family? What is the basis on which it can be done? So these are all one set of issues. The other set of issues is how exactly do you put an end to a life in a very dignified fashion. Okay. Is it that you are allowed to only withdraw the support systems, or is it that you are allowed to administer, say, morphine at the end of life so that life becomes more dignified? So there are any number of issues in terms of, say, the regulatory framework which has to be brought up. So that is the second issue. Now, if you consider these two issues, I think it would also become somewhat clear as to why in countries like India, euthanasia is still illegal. Whereas in many of the developed countries, particularly in the European countries, it's legal. Okay. I think there are basically two reasons why this happens. One is that the so-called secularization of the society in general, secularization of human values would have gone much further in many of these societies compared to, say, a country like India. Okay. And hence, even the idea of a dignified life, idea of a dignified death would have also got secularized much more in these countries than in India. Incidentally, even in the United States, there are very many states where euthanasia or assisted suicide is still not legal. Okay. But many of the European countries are legalized. The second reason why the government hesitates a great deal in terms of making euthanasia legal in these countries is that, as I pointed out, it would require a very well-organized system of checks and balances, or a well-organized system of regulation. Otherwise it can be badly administered, otherwise it can be misused. So given the fact that the regulatory systems in India in general, in third world countries in general, in underdeveloped countries in general, these systems are not well developed, it is more than likely that even in the case of euthanasia, putting in place a proper regulatory system is a very difficult job. So that could be the reason why the government is perhaps still hesitating about making it a legal thing. Thank you.
And
All right.